Hey Frankie,
Hi, you right?
I'm good. Welcome to the Happy Place Virtual Festival. It's so lovely to have you stop by. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. I'm gutted we couldn't do it in person, but I love
I
that you've managed to
know.
make it work.
I know it. We were like, is this going to work? How do we do it? But we're doing it anyway, and I just really hope that people kind of get a feel for what the festival was like last year, and that they enjoy it and are either entertained or get something from it. So thank you for being part of it. This chat is kind of in association with Mind, because I thought it'd be a nice thing to do, because we're both ambassadors. You've been an ambassador for a long time now, and I'd love to talk about their amazing work a little later down the line, because I know that you feel similarly to me, that you're just very proud to be part of what they do, and to, you know, help continue sort of spread the message of what they do as well. It's funny because I think with you and me, there's so many similarities in probably what we've experienced, but we never really talked about it.
No, we haven't at all. I know. I only ever see you really in passing, and I don't know how, but someone sent me a link on Twitter a few weeks ago of like an S Club Juniors video, and then I ended up down this rabbit hole on YouTube, and I realised, Fern, that you were pretty much in my life for most of every day in
I
my
know.
childhood. You literally introed us into every performance. You were interviewing us all the time, and I was like, God, it's nuts how long we've kind of been in each
I
other's
know.
lives.
I know. It's so bonkers, and you know, I remember you guys being on the show all the time, and you know, I'm a bit older than you, but we were both super young. You were super young.
So young.
And so much has changed for both of us, but also the industry we're in, and how we've placed ourselves in it as well. And I do want to get to that in a moment, because I think there's so much to unpick for both of us in that way. Your brilliant book, which I've got just next to me here, I've read recently, and it's a very detailed and brave account of what you've experienced over the years, and how mental illness has affected you. And it's a very nice structure of having your story, but also with your psychologist and psychiatrist dotted throughout, explaining things or unpicking things you've said. For anyone that is unclear, can you explain what a psychologist is versus a psychiatrist, just so we have that clarity?
Okay, so I sometimes mess this up, just so you even when they've been in the room and I'm like, oh, have I got this right? So a psychiatrist to me, and in simple terms, I don't know the medical terms, but for me, so my psychiatrist is Mike, who's in the book, and he's the person that can that diagnosed me and can subscribe me my medication. And so he's the person that picks my treatment, and then lays that plan out for me. So then he told me what medication to go on, and then passed me on to Mal, who's my psychologist, who is the person that I go to for therapy. So for me, they're different in that way. So for me, a psychiatrist is more medical based, and psychologist is more there for me for therapy, to talk to and find ways for me to cope with things myself.
And they're because from what I get from the book, having both of them evenly balanced in your life is the way that you've managed to find some sort of stability and grounding in what you've experienced. So when did they enter your life? At what age were you?
I must have been about 2021. I'd seen a different psychologist before them, and it just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it was about this woman. She was lovely, but I just didn't feel like it clicked, which for me wasn't something I thought was a thing. I thought, you know, you get sent to a therapist, they're who you've been given, and you just deal with that person. And she suggested medication, and I was really against it for no reason other than the fact that society at the time was very much like, you go on it, you come off it. It's not something you stay on. So I was always really wary of that. And so I pushed forward with just therapy, and it didn't work for me. And then I got suggested to go and see Mike. So I saw them for a little while before I ended up having my breakdown. So they've been a really big pivotal part in my life because they helped me through my breakdown and still do to this day. So for me, they're some of like the most important people in my life.
Of course, and I think you've touched on something very important there, that if you do seek to see a psychiatrist, a psychologist or a therapist, it does have to be a good match. You know, I've tried all sorts of therapies over the years, and again, you know, some haven't worked. I haven't had that connection, or there hasn't been that sort of comfort in the discussion and how it flows. And other times you're like, wow, I can sense something's changing. And I think it's important that if people are seeking to get therapy, that they don't just settle for the first person if it doesn't feel quite right. And it is, you know, it is just a bit of trial and error finding someone that works. So before you met your psychologist and your psychiatrist, you had pushed through and struggled a lot for a long time without medication or therapy. And in the book, you talk about having feelings of lowness and extreme worry from a very young age. What form did that take at a young age for you?
It was quite a physical thing for me at a young age. I felt really sick a lot. I got really bad stomach pains. I struggled with my breathing. Mainly at night, my breathing, I would struggle, and because I feel like that's when I'd lay down and really think about things. And it's funny because I think when you're a kid, you don't know what's right or wrong, or what's normal or not normal. So for me, I just thought everyone thought the same way as me. I thought everyone saw bad and danger in everything. And also I think back then anxiety and mental health issues just weren't really spoken about that much, and especially in children. So for me, it was like I'd go to the doctors, I'd go for blood tests to see why I was having all these stomach aches, and it just never really got anywhere. And it kind of became a family joke that I lived on, you know, that pink Peptol. I would literally swig that on a daily basis because I just always had stomach aches. And now I know that that was because of worry. And if you don't do anything about it, it does come out in a physical way.
Well, of course. And anyone who's dealt with anxiety knows that, you know, for sure, mine isn't necessarily a pain or a physical ailment, but it's certainly physically manifests in the fact that, you know, I have a racing heart. Like I've been a little bit edgy today, and there's no reason. You know, I think once you've, you know, established that you deal with anxiety, it just can appear, and I don't feel down with it or anything, but I do feel a little like, oh my God, I've forgotten to do something today and I don't know what it is. And it's just my heart races so much faster. Like I've drunk 1,000 coffees and I haven't. And it's just, I think unless you are aware and deal with it or find your coping mechanisms, like you say, it will physically manifest. So you dealt with this for a very long time without knowing to approach anyone, you know, similarly to me, but later on in my life, you're kind of unsure as to what it is, so you don't feel you necessarily need outside help. But you had a period that you've written about in the book, a very, very tough time in your life where you had a breakdown and you ended up being hospitalized. So again, how was that decision made? Was that due to your psychiatrist and psychologist that you would go and seek time out and have that removal from everyday life to work out what was going on?
Yeah, I think at the time, the Saturdays, we were kind of right at the peak of our career. So we were, you know what it's like, it's just, it's constant and It's amazing, but there's no let up, you know. And the only way for me to get the help that I needed was to take me out of that situation.
Yeah.
And go to a hospital where I could be on my own and concentrate on getting better. Because it's so hard not to work for anyone in any industry. You know, when you've got a job to do, that's what you want to do. You don't want to let anyone down. And I think for me, I just reached the point where I realized that I wasn't coping with any sort of everyday life. I was crying constantly. I was having feelings of not really wanting to be here anymore. And that was more to better other people's lives and to quiet. It was the only way that I could think of that would quiet my brain, because I couldn't even sleep anymore. I wasn't really eating. So I just wasn't functioning as a normal human being. So for Mike and Mal, that was the time when they just said, look, the only way that you're going to get on top of this is if you take yourself out of everyday life and go to hospital. And by that point, it wasn't really a hard decision for me. I was so tired, and I was so drained of having to like almost keep myself alive and keep myself going, that I was quite happy to just hand myself over to someone else and say, you look after me.
It's that point of total surrender. So how did that time in hospital play out for you? Did you settle into it? Did you kind of let go and let others just, tell you how to heal? How did it go?
Yeah, it was weird. I would say the first week or so, I don't really remember much of it. I think I was so broken by that point, and they were trying to get on top of medication, and I was having sleeping tablets because I hadn't been sleeping for months. So that first week, I don't really remember. And then they kind of slowly integrated me into group therapy, which was something I had never done before. I think being in the public eye, that never seemed like an option for me. And it was so freeing to sit in a room full of people and be aware that no one cared who anyone was. No one cared what life they'd come from, what illness they had. It was really, you could say how you'd been feeling. You could talk about what medication you were on and what in your life and what was going on in your brain, and no one was judging each other. And that was a real relief and a real eye-opener, I think, and a massive help to me getting better.
And how did you then find it integrating yourself back into that whirlwind of a lifestyle that I'm well aware of? Because I think at the time you were at your peak with the Saturdays, I was certainly having a different but similar in ways experience, in my life with radio and various TV projects, and it just being relentless. It is really demanding. And I know it sounds somewhat ridiculous because there are jobs that are far harder work and require a lot more, courage or strength, but it is relentless, and it is demanding in the sense that everybody wants something from you. So I can't imagine that was an easy transition back into your old life after such a personal retreat from that situation.
Yeah, it was weird, but so I was supposed to really be in hospital for about 3 months, but we had a tour booked, and there was no insurance for that, for mental health, and also for me, touring was the best part of the job. So there was no part of me that wanted to miss that. So I was only in hospital for a month. So there was a real careful, strategic plan for me to come out. So I was integrated back into work really slowly. I was having vocal lessons to give me my confidence back. And I was given like special drinks and stuff, because I still was kind of pretty much running on adrenaline. So I was never hungry. So I was having to force myself to kind of nourish my body. So I had our tour manager looked after me all the time. I stayed in London so that my travel in and out of work wasn't too long. And the first gig that I did go back to, I had a big panic attack and I wasn't able to do. But it slowly got better and better. And by the time we were on the tour, I was feeling so much better. And I think I was just quite proud at how far I had come by that point.
And did you feel supported by the people around you? Because, up until this point, I guess you hadn't really articulated what you were going through or how you were feeling. So, were the people around you understanding and supportive of you? Because, you weren't going to be able to just get on with it like everybody else.
Yeah, it was amazing, because I think the biggest mistake for any of us who suffer with mental health issues is you think no one's going to understand.
Yeah.
And like people don't care, and that's just not the case with everybody. Yes, some people won't understand, and yes, some people won't be caring, but I think the important people always will be.
Yeah.
they really helped me to get back into work. They gave me the time I needed, and they might not have necessarily understood it all, but they were there. And for the girls as well in the band, like that was the first panic attack they'd ever seen me have. So I think for them that was a bit scary, and a big realization into what I had been going through for so long without anyone knowing.
It's great. It's so brilliant, because I think one of my biggest regrets is, you know, in my personal life, I chose certain people that I knew would understand and be up for having a conversation that wasn't fluffy or surface, and actually, you know, it was true, and I was going to be vulnerable and, you know, be completely open with them. But at work, I mean, I didn't say a thing. And I did feel exactly all those things that you've just described, that, you know, nobody would understand. I thought I'd be ostracised from everybody there socially, and I'd be seen as kind of odd or unable to cope, which I wasn't at the time. But I do massively regret not saying anything at all, because, you know, now I talk about everything freely, and I don't care if people judge me or not. I honestly couldn't give a toss. But I think back then there was less conversation around all of this, and luckily it is so much more sort of threaded into our everyday consciousness and conversation. So hopefully people will find it slightly easier in the workplace to be able to admit how they're feeling, rather than it be seen as a weakness. I was always terrified that I would be, you know, I'd never work again because I would be seen as unreliable or whatever. And
back then there was a risk.
Yeah, I know.
It's different now. People wouldn't get away with it now. But I remember filling out forms and people saying to me, "Oh, don't put that you take antidepressants. Or don't mention this." And it was like that. It was seen as that you couldn't cope. And I still do have moments where I think, oh, if I get this job, are people going to be thinking, oh, what if she can't do it every day or whatever? And now I am a bit more like, well, sodom, if they don't think I can, then, you know, I've got to where I am.
Yeah, and it's totally. Yeah, and it's about knowing your own limits, isn't it, as well? You know, like recently I said yes to something, and then I had a crazy panic attack and I pulled out. And it's like, I knew I wasn't going to be able to cope with that. Why did I say yes in the first place? I should have been honest. But I think there is that slight hangover always that you go, oh, I've just got to push through this. This is fine. You know, this is ridiculous. I need to face it. But other times I think you do need to give yourself a break and go, I don't have to put myself under that pressure. And it's about knowing that. And I guess we're at a similar place in our lives where we're lucky enough to have children. We've got our family. And that's, from what I, again, have read from your book, seems to have boosted you in a lot of ways, confidence-wise and stability-wise. And I definitely feel the same, as utterly tiring as it can be, especially at the moment. I do think that it does give you something else to put, you know, energy into, rather than it be all about work, which we both previously lived through. So, you know, you've established that you've had these feelings from way, way back when you were a tiny child, yet didn't necessarily understand them. So you probably would have always had to have dealt with a level of mental illness and challenges in that area. But do you think stepping into the role that you did at such a young age exasperated it, you know, tipped it into a whole new, you know, unmanageable level? How do you think that affected you?
I definitely think it added to it.
Yeah.
I don't think people assume that that's where it all came from. And as you said, it was how I was before S Cup Juniors, before the Saturdays. So I do think it's ingrained in me anyway.
Yeah.
But obviously it made it worse, you know, being in the public eye, not necessarily in S Cup Juniors. There was no social media. No one really wrote about us.
Heaven.
Yeah, like I had no idea if people liked us.
Same.
Sure, there were so many people that found 8 kids prancing around on the stage, being interviewed, so annoying. I've watched some of the videos and I'm like, oh my God, I would have hated us. But I didn't know. And I was just having a great time. You know, I was doing the thing that I loved, and I had no idea. And we had an amazing team of people. Whereas the Saturdays, even at the beginning, we didn't really have much social media, but, you know, there's online papers now that can write about you in a split second. People can send you messages straight away. You know, you are aware of what people were saying. And I think as you get older, you know, when I was younger, I was just doing it for fun. And as you get older, you realize that it will come to an end. You realize that people have got an opinion about you. You also need to earn money because you're older and you've got your future to think about. So I think there's so many different things. And as you get older, you do get insecurities and fears that you don't have when you're a kid. So I do think it definitely added to it. Of course it did. But I do also think I would have been like that either way.
I mean, I had a completely similar experience in the fact that when I started doing digging stuff, you know, social media wasn't even a concept. I think the internet was just sort of starting. And again, I just did it for fun, and I didn't know what people thought of me. Again, they probably thought a 15-year-old girl on TV was highly annoying. But, you know, you are just there in the moment having a great time and sort of grinning inanely because you can't believe your luck that you're doing it. And in exactly the same way, you know, I guess when I was on Radio 1, sort of that era is when Twitter came about, and then Instagram, and then you are so, you know, at radio, you'd get instant feedback whilst you were on air still. And, you know, you had the text messaging thing, which I hated looking at, where anybody could say anything. And it was, you know, there were lots of lovely interaction, and that was what the show was sort of almost founded on. But also there is a whole other element, and, you know, the only way, and it has massively affected me, I would completely be lying if I said that it hadn't at times catastrophically, but I think now I've got to the point where usually I can understand that those people are probably insanely unhappy. Otherwise, I would never send someone a message that I didn't know that was awful. And none of my friends would, or family members, you know, they just wouldn't. So I can sometimes get to that place where I understand where they're at, and that most people in the public eye have been sort of dehumanized to some extent. But I think it still does hurt. And I found it more so with journalists. You know, the Twitter thing I can almost find peace with, but when it's journalists, I feel like absolutely horrendous. I don't know why that is a real Achilles heel for me. When someone writes something really acerbic and awful about you, and it's like, you've got me so wrong, or the opinion is unfair and too personal. And I don't know how to deal with that one still. I wonder what coping mechanisms you have found to sort of deal with the onslaught of everyday judgment that you have.
I mean, I'm the same. I don't deal with it all the time. I think a lot of it has to do with how I'm feeling at that time. And I also think sometimes if it's something that I believe about myself already, I then, like, you know, I can tell myself a million times I'm a bad person, people don't like me, X, Y, and Z. So then if someone was to say that, for me it's just confirmation of what I already think. Do I feel like that hurts more than when someone says something that I don't believe of myself, unless it's like say like a whole article has come out that is just completely absurd, and you're like, well, that's unfair, because you know how the public believe it, they read it, and you are kind of stuck with that. Whatever people say, it does stick with it. So that is hard, but I have found over the years that happens less. So I found that easier. I find more now if it's based on my kids or my husband or my parenting, I find that harder. Whereas before someone could say, oh, she looks fat, or I don't like her hair, and that would really hurt my feelings, you know. So I don't know. I just don't think you ever get used to that. It's you know, in other life, having to hear someone say something horrible about you is going to hurt.
Yeah, it's not nice.
You know, when you can reread that, it's not good.
And also from reading your book, I can see that very much, again, like me, you have a tendency to self-loathe for no particular reason. You know, I spend most of my day trying not to self-loathe about stuff, and I still do now. It's one of my things I need to work on more than anything is, and I've spent my life writing about it and I still haven't mastered it, but, you know, I do tons of affirmations about accepting myself in, you know, an emotional, physical and mental way. And it just still seems so hard. And I wonder what progress you have personally made with that.
I wouldn't say that I have really, annoyingly. I really envy people that can love themselves and their body and be happy with choices and decisions they've made. I spend my whole life, what if?
Yeah.
What if I've made that wrong decision? What if I'd made this decision? You know, and it is hard. I often wonder, because I feel like especially our industry is full of people like that, and I wonder, is it the industry that makes you that way, or is it just those type of people that end up in that industry because they need that?
Yeah, I think about this one all the time. I was thinking about this today, you know, why do any of us, whether in the public eye or not, or, you know, with a following or not, why do we need that outside appreciation from our friends, from our parents still, even when we're adults maybe, from strangers a lot of the time in our case? And I've put a lot of time thinking about that, you know, why do I need that? Why can't I just feel that myself? Because also, even when you do get it, so, you know, most people assume that, you know, and I assume it about people who are in that, you know, sort of movie star stratosphere in Los Angeles or whatever, oh, they must feel complete. You know, they're so adored and everything looks so shiny. And I fall into that silly trap. And I know it's not true, because even if you have, in your case, thousands of people screaming at you when you're singing on a stage, or people saying they adore you on your Instagram account, you don't feel any different or better. You might for like 1 second go, oh, that was nice, but it doesn't stick around. So we all know that that self-love is from deep within us, and it can only be cultivated in that way. So it seems tricky.
I just don't know if it exists. I feel like we all look for that, whoever you are, you look for that true happiness, that pinnacle point of where you go, all right, I have done everything I can. I am happy with everything I've got, everything I am, I'm done. And I wonder, does anybody really feel that? But what is that? How do you, what is it? Is it love? Is it happiness? Is it, I mean, we know it's not things, but I don't know. I find myself as a person, I'm always looking for that next thing. And I'm kind of learning that next thing is never going to fix me. I've learned along the way, but it doesn't stop me going, oh, if I just get that next job, or if I just, whatever, will that make me feel that completeness or that?
No, I mean, it's human nature, isn't it, to constantly desire. So we all, I guess, have experienced that you desire something, you may attain it, whether it doesn't have to be a thing, but, you know, a state of mind or something in life, and then that dissipates and then you desire again. And I don't necessarily think desire ever goes, but maybe the contentment comes from an acceptance of that's how we are. And we can't seek anything positive at the end of each desire, but we can maybe enjoy the process of getting there or doing it. And I know it's not that simple, because it's hard to sort of live that one out and feel completely fine during it. And I also, when I was thinking about talking to you today, I thought, you know, I've obviously done a lot of writing about depression and happiness. And, you know, my first book's called Happy, and it's quite a loaded title, because it's not about that being the holy grail. I think that if we don't give value to all the other emotions, then we stop learning, because, you know, it's not all about, imagine if you just felt happy all the time, it'd be bloody boring and you wouldn't learn anything.
No, and
so
you
I
wouldn't
think
strive for anything.
You wouldn't strive for anything. So I think it's about that acceptance that, oh, what can I learn from, like, I feel a bit jittery today, or what can I learn from this, or what am I going to get from that, and trying to find that value in each emotion. And I think the self-loathing thing, maybe again, that's, for us, it's about acceptance rather than it being fixed or completed. And again, it's not by any means an easy thing to do, but it's something that we can talk about and work on for sure. So let's talk about your work with Mind, because you've been with them for way longer than I have. So I think, was it 2013 you started working with them? what initially felt right about that partnership and you collaborating with them and helping them spread their message?
I just think at the time it was only really Stephen Fry that was someone that really spoke about his mental health, and he's like awesome, obviously.
We love him.
Yeah, and he was already part of Mind, and it was so much smaller then when I started with them, you know, even down to every year when I go back to the Mind Awards, I am blown away with how big it is and how many people there are there. Because when I went in, the first one, it was in this tiny little theatre. It was just me and Stephen Fry, same, and in this tiny little theatre room. And I think at the time for me, they were the main people, the main advocates for mental health that were out there, and it was a really new thing for me, so they kind of took me in and made me feel comfortable and safe by being there. And I remember Wayne came with me, and that was really nice because it was just a realization of, wow, this is a thing, there's a whole charity for this, these people all know about it, they all talk about it, they deal with it day in, day out. And I've always known that I was in a privileged position where I could pay to go and have a therapist and go and see a psychiatrist and have all the treatment I needed. And that's not the case for everybody, and not everyone knows where to find it or how to access it. So for me, it was amazing to see a charity that were helping people to get the help that they need.
I know, it's like you say, that it's such a lovely setup that you do feel part of something, and like you say, the Mind Media Awards that they do every year are so wonderful, because there's so many people that are working incredibly hard in their own area or community to help a lot of other people, and it is really encouraging to know that exists and it's out there. So yeah, I'm sure that we'll both be sticking around with Mind for the foreseeable future. They're just so brilliant. I mean, I feel like I haven't even covered anywhere near all this stuff that I've written on a page with you. There's so many other things I want to get into, but maybe we can pick up another time and do another chat, or we'll do a podcast episode or something, because there's so many things that we could discuss, and I think so many similarities in our lives, and I hope that we get to continue having that conversation, because we certainly understand each other in that way, which is really lovely. Frankie, thank you so much. What a lovely opportunity to talk to you, and stay safe and take care, and we will meet again soon, I'm sure, with Mind.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
The pandemic has affected the mental health of millions of people, our friends, family, frontline workers, and especially those of us already dealing with anxiety. Now, we don't know what the coming weeks or months hold, but one thing we know for certain is that the effects on our mental health will be long-lasting. If you can donate to Mind today, it would be so appreciated, so that their mental health support services can continue to reach as many people as possible. If you would like to donate, it would be brilliant. All you need to do is head to mind.org.uk/happyplace to ensure that Mind can keep doing the vital work they're doing to reach vulnerable people all over the UK. Thank you.